Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamualaikum. Ji ayanu pakhair agale ni hao chunishumme washwale. Ohai gonzaimas guten morgen. Hola boyo privyet kaifa hal? Hale shuma chatore. Ahlan wa sahlan marhaba. Buna mucho gracias. Swabia balli kare aya. Hoş geldin and sayo khuyamora chivato chi haljod kale mera khairutan. And a very warm welcome to everybody who's tuned into PTV World and watching World this morning. Alongside my very well-learned colleague who happens to be Miss Hajra Satti. I happen to be Shahzad Khan, and we hope and pray that everybody out there is doing wonderfully well and that you're ready to kickstart your day with us. But first things first, hello Hajra, assalamu alaikum. How are you feeling today?
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Jazakallah khair, for introducing me. So now moving on to a very interesting development in Islamabad, and that is the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has arrived in Islamabad for a crucial two-day visit. President Erdogan is accompanied by a high-level delegation, and this visit marks another milestone in enduring the friendship between Pakistan and Turkey, as both nations continue to strengthen their ties across various segments. And this is a very interesting development regarding President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has arrived at Islamabad, and he has been received by a very warm welcome. And Pakistan and Turkey is historic ties. They have enjoyed very historic ties, and they go back to even the modern day Turkish Republic, back to the Ottoman Empire, when we used to hail them as a spiritual center of the Muslim Ummah.
Exactly, and there's another good news as well, and that is that Pakistan registered a historic win ahead of Champions Trophy 2025, sealing the spot in Tri-Series final after beating South Africa in Karachi. Salman Ali Agha and Captain Mohammad Rizwan both struck hundreds as Pakistan advanced to the Tri-Series final with their most successful ODI run chase ever in front of a full audience at the National Stadium in Karachi on Wednesday. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we will be eyeing against New Zealand in the final of the Tri-Nation Series as well. It looked like as if Pakistan might not be able to chase the hefty target of 350 plus, but we were able to do it. Wow, I think that's what Pakistan team is famously known for. They can do it on any given day, and they might not do it even when it's simple, then probably eating a roti.
Right, and that's very interesting analysis. And obviously now, so there was a very interesting report that was published on National Geographic, and actually that is a concern for the modern day parenting conveniences that I find in a lot of parents, and that is, there was a survey by the Education Week which said that 77% of the educators have reported that younger kids are finding a greater difficulty in handling pencils and scissors. In comparison, 69% struggle with the shoes as compared to 5 years ago. So what about the experiences of the child, because we are witnessing a transition of the play-based childhood towards the mobile-based childhood, and how are the screen impacting the infant mental health, and what do we need to do in order to make sure that we are raising a resilient nation of the younger people out there, or younger kids out there. So in order to unfold this conversation, we are very glad that we have been joined by a psychiatrist. He happens to be Dr. ROOP, ZAINAB, RANA. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. ROOP, and thank you so much for joining us.
Assalamu alaikum ji. I'm happy to be here and discuss something that's very close to my heart.
So Dr. Saiba, you've heard the introduction. I mean, as a psychiatrist, what do you have to say? Is it a convenient parenting practices that are to be blamed for this kids losing the fine motor skills at such an early age?
So I think there are a few parts to this particular question. It's a great question. I think it's something very pertinent to parents today who are struggling with the crisis of not having institutionalized childcare and not perhaps having that many supports in the family itself, with the growing sort of way in which families are now becoming single units rather than joint families.
Yeah.
So the way in which I think I would like to sort of answer that question is that fundamentally there are a few capacities that the brain has. One capacity is, of course, motor skills. Another is language development. The other is social development, emotional development. These capacities are built on the foundation of the basically in physical and mental health.
Okay.
Now, when we think about what is the foundation for this, physical and mental health, I mean health in general, we would now start to think of infants as having mental health, which is unfortunately in Pakistan something that we haven't really caught up to. And to that end, I think I would like to tell you that we are working on having a conference on infant and early childhood mental health in April in Islamabad, and the goal in this is we would like, this is not one of those conferences that we want to have sort of experts to come in and you know talk to each other. We would like parents to attend and to be able to learn what they can be doing. Now, in terms of screen time, you know, the WHO recommends that up until 2 years of age, 0 screen time. And in terms of ages then 2 to 5, perhaps only an hour of screen time a day is something recommended by the World Health Organization. It's because of the fact that the brain is built on the principle of if you do something, you are able to do it. Now, when you're holding a screen, you are doing this movement only, or perhaps you would do a swipe movement. Whereas in order to develop the motor, language, social, emotional parts of the brain, you have to be engaged in an activity where there is a response, and where you are using these skills with your motor skills, and that you are engaged in a receptive, responsive relationship with a parent.
And I believe that, you know, for a reference, imagine that for a kid, you know, who's actually 3 years old, cannot actually say a word. As soon as starts going to school, you know, he will come back with newer words, and, you know, the language will certainly flourish as well. Now, imagine that I've got an example over here of my own daughter, alhamdulillah, and what happened was that, you know, because obviously there was a lot of screens around her, she picked up on a language which wasn't her first language, so that was English, right? And it was shocking for us that how smartly children have done it. For us to kind of blame it on screens only, do you think is that correct as well? Or do you think that it needs to be a mixed balance between screen time? Because I think in days to come, probably we might not even write. You know, I think we are already there. We get printouts now as well. Everything's on the cell phone. I know that it is essential to write, but do you think that, you know, just blaming the screen will be the right thing to do?
I think I would probably be the last person to demonize anything that's helping a stressed parent, but we do need to sort of set these boundaries where we're thinking of what we are doing instead of spending that time with the child, right? So if you are in a conversation with a child and they're talking, I would much rather that, you know, you got the child to come and do laundry with you, which is what you were giving up when you give your child a screen. What you're trying to do is not to just give them something to do, you're trying to give them something to do so that you can do something else. So what I would recommend as a mental health professional would be go and do that thing with the child. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it will be developing their brains, because even things like sorting colors when you're doing laundry, even things like you know, making tiny rotis, which is something that, you know, children used to be able to do.
Or probably just open up your walls. You know, I think that's exactly what we have done as parents. I know Abu and Ammi, you know, their Dada and Dado certainly are not really happy with it, but, you know, on all the walls, particularly, I think in my household, they have drawn something. But while we are at it, I think there's another important anecdote, and that is that imagine that now we are talking about the infant's mental health. Now, if we are to speak about infant's mental health, what are those, you know, key points which a parent can observe that, okay, you know, we probably might need to look after the mental health of the child, because it just goes, इधर से एक चपेट पड़ गई, उधर से एक पड़ गई, जो तुम ठीक नहीं कर रहे हो, तुम गलत नहीं कर रहे हो. This is how our culture is of nurturing and nourishing our children. So how do you think we can identify as parents that our child needs help?
So first, I think I want to clarify that when we say mental health, we don't mean illness, right? So, you know, it's actually not to do with having to see a psychiatrist. It's the opposite. It's to prevent illness. When we talk of infant mental health, what we're trying to say is fundamentally treat the infant like a human being.
Thank you so much.
So it's really that simple. When you treat somebody like a human being, you want to listen to them, you want to take care of them, you want to respond when they cry, you want to pick them up, you want to take care of them. Whereas, and this is a problem that, you know, Western culture unfortunately has sort of thrust upon us, because what our culture says has never been that if the baby cries, don't pick them up. Culturally, women would have taken babies into the fields, they would have been carrying them, they would have been holding them. Breastfeeding would have been something that is mandated by religion, by culture. Now, all of this with Western influence is something that has changed the way we think, in which our grandmothers now wouldn't have said this, but our children's grandmothers will say things like, don't pick up the baby, it'll spoil them, they'll get used to it, it'll ruin their behavior, they're trying to manipulate you, things that are fundamentally false, right? That children do not have that kind of brain development where they can learn to manipulate an adult, right?
But Dr. Zainab, I would very quickly like to ask you and squeeze as much information from you as you can, because your presence here is an absolute pleasure. So now, like Shahzad mentioned a very important point, which is like you've mentioned that how the writing is threatened because of the mobile phones, right? And I really don't recall the last time I wrote. I mean, I do write every day because of, you know, I have to come here. But generally, you know, if I'm going to the market, you know, usually I write it on my electric notes or electric e-pad, right? So do you feel the artificial intelligence and this lure of, you know, efficient writing is threatening the handwriting, and how much handwriting is essential to develop these fine motor skills in the child? Because I do remember when we were growing up, writing, coloring, drawing, they were such an essential part of it. But now it's been replaced by swipes and by the taps, which is like, I don't know, is it a cause of concern?
So I think the way to think about this is not to think that, you know, they don't need to write, so it's fine, they don't have to write. It's to think about what are all the things that you are able to do with your hands. And you will not be able to do any of those things. And now, when we talk about motor development specifically, it starts with gross motor development, which means that you pick up something, that's a big movement, or you are cycling or walking or crawling, these are gross motor development things. Then fine motor developments are pincer grasps. So, you know, picking up, being able to feed yourself. Now, I think we might be a little bit far away from the time where artificial intelligence is going to put a nivala in our mouths. So, we do still need our motor skills in that sense. The way to develop them is to, if you stick to those lines of, you know, they can't be doing screen things all the time, I would rather give them, you know, a piece of Play-Doh. We do need to kind of sit with the discomfort of children do cry, children do get upset, they don't have the language development to express themselves. And as a society, I think we need to become a little bit more tolerant of having children in our midst. They used to cry all the time, we were okay with it. Yes, there used to be more open spaces, and now we're in more closed spaces, but we do need to tolerate them. They are going to become humans for tomorrow.
Thank you so much for ending it and wrapping it up such beautifully. And I think this is the need of the hour, that we need to make sure that the luxuries that were afforded to us as a child when we were growing up, for example, we had a play-based childhood, but these kids have now mobile-based childhood, and that is doing a lot of harm to these kids. So we need to be made more cognizant of the fact that, you know, how we bring up these kids is going to impact them for the days to come, for their life to come, and we need to be very mindful of how our convenient parenting practices might not harm them, you know, mentally and emotionally and in physical development. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Saiba, for being here, for elaborating on the impact of the infant mental health and how motor skills are being damaged because of the screen. So now we are going to move on to another very interesting development, and that is that the day happens to be the World Radio Day. It is being celebrated every year on the February 13. The day was proclaimed in 2011 by UNESCO and adopted by UN General Assembly to highlight radio's significance as a reliable medium despite rapid technological changes. And the theme of this day happens to be radio and the climate change. But we have a very interesting package. Don't go anywhere and take a look at that, because that visual representation explains a lot.
Today, we celebrate the remarkable power of radio, a medium that has remained resilient and relevant despite the rapid advancements in technology. From its early days, radio has evolved to become an essential part of our lives. Far from being obsolete, radio continues to play a crucial role in our world. Its unique ability to reach people in the most remote corners of the globe ensures that communities stay connected. Radio is a trusted source of news and information, especially during times of crisis. When disaster strikes and other communication channels fail, radio proves to be a lifeline. It provides real-time updates, emergency information, and a sense of reassurance to those affected. Radio's reliability in such moments is unmatched, proving its enduring value. On this World Radio Day, let's celebrate the resilience and impact of radio. Let's recognize the dedication of radio professionals who bring us content that informs, entertains, and inspires. And let's continue to support this incredible medium that remains a vital part of our lives, especially when we need it the most.
Thank you so much, Sajeel Dogar, for this lovely report and lovely audio and visual contribution on World Radio Day as well. And Hajra, I think as a matter of fact, I started off as a radio jockey, not just that. I think for all of those people who think that radio might have gone obsolete, well, it's not. You know, may it be climate change, may it be COVID times, you've seen how radio has played an instrumental role. But ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that for that one gentleman who's been doing the Rush Hour show on FM 89 for the last 21 years, a very dear friend of ours is with us all the way from Canada. Hello, Wes. Assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you doing today?
Wa alaikum assalam. Good to be on your show and good to meet you after so many years, buddy. How you been?
Yeah, every time you're on the mic, you know, it's you know, your voice will actually take us, you know, through all of those years that you've been on radio. There's nostalgia. How do you feel about World Radio Day today in particular? And then we'll move forward with other questions.
Kind of feel sad about it, man, because the world is changing and it's leaving radio behind.
Right. Wes, can you hear us?
Yeah, he can.
I can hear you.
I think that's all he wanted to say.
Okay. Wes, so now let's kickstart our conversation. Please take us through, you know, your radio experiences, because your voice was the voice which captivated a lot of hearts, especially millennials, because we have grown up listening to your voice. And I think the good thing about the radio is that it can afford you or lend you an anonymity which TV might not lend you, and you're better able to articulate a lot of your thoughts and ideas, which, you know, maybe the non-privacy of the TV does not lend you, affords you. Do you agree with this assertion?
Of course. I mean, you know, you're behind a kind of a veil, and you have this freedom to speak your mind. And if you're not censored, or if you're not, you know, inhibited from saying what you want to say. And I think it makes it a little bit easier. That's why the flow of speech is much more interesting, and the conversations are more interesting on radio. And plus, you have to imagine what the person is like, you know, because you can't see them and you can only hear them. Communication is, you know, about 80% your body language and your facial expressions, and your voice and your words are only about 20%. So if you're only using 20% of those faculties, there's a lot of imagination involved. So yeah, it's a challenge, and it's quite an interesting experience. At the same time, I've been lucky to be on radio for the last 26 years. And, you know, I've seen radio evolve from something very basic to something very unique and digital now in this age.
Exactly. But Wes, in addition to this, I think in my defense of radio, what I would say is, because I've done radio myself for 6-7 years, but what I believe is, I think that radio has evolved and transformed as well. Now imagine we have spaces on X where people come together, you know, they speak about issues as well. So do you think that for us to kind of relate radio with all of these spaces that which are made available to us online, can actually be affiliated with the conventional and traditional radio, or do you think that's the evolution process of radio, or do you disagree to all of this?
No, the technologies tie in together, right? The world is a more connected place, and radio is just one piece of that connection. So if you've got social media that complements the national broadcast or a broadcaster on radio, it's a good thing. And I don't disagree with you. I actually agree with you. I think it's, you know, an amalgamation of all the different technologies that we have. So, for example, when I first started out in 2004 on City FM 89, we were introduced to text message technology way back then. Before that, it was just a phone call or phone line, you know, on the radio. Even phones were introduced, you know, in the 70s and 80s on radio. Before that, they were, you know, not integrated into the communication system of the radio broadcast. So from 2004 to 2024, well, we're in 2025 now, in 20 years, we've evolved from, you know, text messages to now WhatsApp, you know, FaceTime, Skype. I've used all these technologies during my radio broadcast. I've used Skype, I've used WhatsApp, I've used FaceTime. We always use Instagram, not so much Twitter and X anymore. There's Threads, you know, there's Line, there's WeChat.
I think Shahzad mentioned something very important, and that is that the evolution of the radio in the modern and digital age. And we've seen that when podcast started as a medium, it was more of an amalgamation of the audio with and its integration into the social media spaces, right? And now we see that there are video podcasts too. And podcast is the medium that has grappled, I would say, the attention of a lot of millennials or a lot of people, you know, which has lost their attention towards the broadcast media. So in this entire scenario, do you feel that radio has the capacity to foster a positive change and to bring back a local community, because its infiltration into those spaces, those areas where digital language or digital social media cannot reach, radio is still there, maybe in the peripheries or the fringes. So how can we foster radio as a medium to have more open communication and to bring a positive change?
Radio's reach is only effective where cellular technology or internet technology can't penetrate. And, you know, we've got pretty much penetration of the internet all over the world and all over Pakistan now. And if you're talking about very, very remote areas where internet bandwidth is not available through cellular technology or through, you know, a cable, then radio can make an impact because that's the only source of public broadcast that's available. But that's, again, it's dying. You know, when it comes to making a social impact, radio can do that. And we do that on a daily basis. We talk about, you know, entertainment, we talk about information, we talk about people's views. You know, it's relevant, it's important, it's current. And, you know, it depends on the broadcasters and the, you know, people in charge on, you know, the type of programming that's presented, you know, to the public. Podcasts has taken over. We used to have talk radio, you know, where there would be just people just talking to each other. That's what podcasts are. There's no music in a podcast, but on a radio show, there's music. If you listen to my show, it's 80% music and 20% me, right? I'll be talking in between the songs and in between the commercials. So it all depends on what your programming content is like. If you've got to
talk about, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about, and I think for all of those people who are still listeners of radio, I think the most annoying element is where it's 80% of the radio jockey and 20% of music, or, you know, talking in between the music and whatnot. But while we are at it, Bas, imagine that, you know, that this very technological equipment has actually lived for more than a century now. So back in 1924, Mr. Marconi actually, if I'm not wrong, came up with this very device, you know, may it be war, may it be COVID-19, where people could not come to the studios, people were going to radio stations, may it be climate change. I think still there's a lot of advocacy that, you know, this instrument we call radio can do. How do you think that the radio, or particularly Radio Pakistan for that matter, because Honorable Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif Sahab has said that, you know, we are going to make sure that we bring up Radio Pakistan as well. What are the ways with which you think that another century the radio can live with us?
They should make me a consultant at Radio Pakistan. I used to work there for 5 years.
Without a doubt.
I started my first radio career with Radio Pakistan as a newscaster and an FM DJ for FM 101. So I think I could help them out. What they need to focus on is, you know, groundbreaking programming and the people. And if they can get, you know, celebrities and famous personalities and make their homegrown talent and promote that talent and talk about relevant current issues at the moment, at the time, then people will listen to the radio. People just want to listen to something which is, you know,
yeah, not just that. In addition to this, imagine that if our kids can listen to all of those rhymes on YouTube, why can't we play them on radio? I mean, we should do that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely. So the podcasts and digital media just took over a gap that radio provided, because radio thought that maybe we should go this way, and people were like, maybe we want to go this way. So podcasts went this way and radio went this way, and that's why there's that disconnect, and there's more people listening to podcasts than there are, you know, people listening to radio. And when you've got people's attention, the advertiser and the advertising money follows that too. So that's what makes it profitable. And that's why, you know, radio revenues have been going down in the last decades, whereas podcasting has become a $350 billion industry in the last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and thank you so much for saying that, Wes, and thank you so much for being on our show and reviving back all of those memories. And like Shahzad mentioned, the nostalgia that I, in my teenagers, used to go through, because there was a time when we were glued towards radio and all of these programs coming in. Social media was not a big thing at that time, and I wonder that what our kids are going to go through, because they have not witnessed that transition in an era, the non-social media towards the social media. But once again, thank you so much for being here and for celebrating the World Radio Day with us. And until next time, it's a goodbye. Allah Hafiz and goodbye.
Good morning. Have a great day.